High Banks Metro Park may be best known for its dramatic geology, these scenic gorges that feed into the Olentangy River. But during the early spring, the wildflowers here can also put on quite a show. April is a great month to get out and hike the trails and see the remarkable diversity of wildflowers blooming here.
If you were with us last time on the Underfoot Metro Park hike we saw the beautiful yellow trout lilies. And here, as I mentioned in the previous video, we have the other species of trout lily that's white. And this is its flower right here. You can see it has that exact same shape, about the same size, but it's white. It's a white flower. The leaves are also pretty much identical. They have that dappled water look on them. And just like we saw at the other Metro Park, you can see how in some areas these leaves really take over. They just take off and you've got them all over the place. And they just create this beautiful, even without the flowers, this beautiful landscape of dappled leaves. We have another flower we saw here last time, this very delicate spring beauty with those bright pink stripes on the petals and those kind of grass-like bladey leaves here. And we have a new one right next to the spring beauty that looks very similar, but if you count the petals, it has a few more petals on it, and the leaves are different. And this is rue anemone. It's a very beautiful little dainty white flower with these kind of lobed leaves here, and it grows in these small clumps. But like I said, side by side, very similar to the spring beauty, but it doesn't have those kind of pink stripes, and its leaves are very different. So right here we have one of the most uniquely named and uniquely formed wildflowers you're going to see, Dutchman's breeches. Breeches because it looks like little pants. So these little hanging white flowers sort of look like little breeches, little old-fashioned Dutchman's breeches. And then you've got these really distinctive feathery, kind of almost ferny leaves here that you can see long before the flower comes out. And you'll be able to identify them long after the flower's gone. But this is definitely one of my favorite early spring wildflowers you'll see around here.
Native bees and flies are the primary pollinators of many of these early spring wildflowers. Though many of us are very bee and wasp averse because we don't like being stung, these small native bees are often solitary or even stingless, and the solitary bees are less likely to sting you because they're likely not defending any kind of communal hive. So this is a great opportunity to appreciate these native insects and watch them go from flower to flower.
So we've talked about wildflowers a lot. I've used the term a lot, but I want to kind of define that. A wildflower we often refer to as a kind of plant, but of course the flower is just part of the plant. When I use the term wildflower, when most people use the term wildflower, what we're talking about is any wild-growing native species of plant that has a flower, any flowering plant. So many of the green plants you see out here are in fact things that people would call wildflowers, even if a lot of them aren't in bloom right now. They all have different seasons. What we're seeing right now are mostly the early spring flowering plants that we call wildflowers. But they're very unique, lots of diversity here, many of them very, very pretty, but I like to always make that distinction.
While there's a great diversity of spring blooming wildflowers here in these mature mesic forests throughout High Banks, you'll notice fewer and fewer flowers are blooming as the canopy leaves out and we move closer to summer. However, if you look for the fields and the forest edges, that's where you'll find many of your summer blooming flowers.
When we hear the word violet, we often think of the color, kind of a bluish, purplish color. But when we're talking about plants, there's a whole group, a whole genus of plants that we consider violets. They're not all bluish purple. And right here, we have a yellow violet, the downy yellow violet, very common plant here. But if you're thinking of the word and the color, you might never assume that this is a kind of a violet. But if you look at this and compare it to the common blue violet, which is also really common here, you'll notice their leaves are very similar and the flower shape is very similar. The main difference to just look at them real quickly is the color of the flower. But this is also a kind of violet. So here we have one of my favorite spring wildflowers, large-flowered trillium. And the word trillium has tri in it, which means three. And everything about this plant is three. 3 leaves, 3 petals. You can kind of see it right there. It has those 3 beautiful big white petals and the 3 leaves under it. And there's a number of different trillium species here, but this is the biggest and showiest that you're going to see around. And these individuals are actually kind of small. They get almost twice this size in some cases. They're really, really beautiful, big white flowers. And every now and then you happen upon a hillside that's just covered in them, and it's absolutely gorgeous.
This video is by no means an exhaustive look at all of the wildflowers you might find during the spring at High Banks, but only some of the common ones you might encounter. I encourage you to get out with a field guide and hike the trails yourself. Go at your own pace and see what you can find.
When we think of flowers, we often think about our big showy flowers that we put in our gardens. But these flowers are usually not native. They're exotics, they're hybrids that we bred to be big and flashy. But right now, the early spring, is the time to get out and appreciate our native woodland wildflowers that are all taking advantage of the lack of canopy over their heads to come into full bloom and carpet the forest floor with beautiful colors. So I hope you've enjoyed today's hike. I hope you've learned a few things, and I hope this encourages you to get out and enjoy your wildflowers in your own backyard.